sorry, we can't give you care. We could lose our license. We could face criminal penalties. That's what we're going to be faced with in Nebraska, and that's what we're already seeing happen play out in other states. These gynecologists, these medical doctors from Grand Island continue. In addition, it puts physicians caring for them in a very complicated logistical situation. The language in the amended LB 574, which specifically targets abortion, does imply that there will be repercussions for physicians who perform these abortions, but it is not clear what those consequences will be. As a result, it will default to criminal charges. This is poorly written legislation that is anti-physician. Just this year, family medicine residents are no longer required to learn obstetrics as part of their training per national guidelines. Well, in Senator Jacobson's situation, that would be really bad if they had had to see a doctor who didn't have training in obstetrics for that difficult pregnancy. As all obstetrical care moves to obstetricians only in the coming decades, it is critical that we do what we can to make Nebraska an appealing state for new OBGYN graduates to move to for work. However, a recent study published by the Association on American Medical Colleges that showed that fourth-year medical students, after the Dobbs v. Jackson decision, that was the thing that overturned Roe v. Wade, we're already ranking residency programs to reduce their chances of matching in states with severe abortion bans, especially in obstetrics and gynecology and emergency medicine. Bills like LB 574 and abortion bans will mean that we will lose quality physician candidates to other states, and women in rural parts of our state will have to travel even further to access routine obstetrical care. In some parts of the state, women already have to travel 2 or more hours. Because it can take 5 or more years to recruit physicians to a practice in areas outside of Lincoln and Omaha, passing legislation like this now will have implications for the physician workforce for decades, and ultimately maternal infant health for at least as long. It is impossible to legislate every single potential medical situation. As physicians, we have trained for years to be prepared to care for patients in many different situations and to be able to adapt and apply skills to new and unique medical problems as we encounter them, so that we can provide both patient-centered and evidence-based care in complex scenarios in obstetrics and gynecology. We could spend days telling you about all the patients we have encountered over the years that have given me the perspective, from a professional standpoint, that any further abortion bans in Nebraska are not good and that targeting trans youth is dangerous. Please oppose LB 574 and amended LB 574 and any abortion bans. Respectfully, Grand Island obstetricians and gynecologists. Libby Crockett, MD, Catherine Kenna, MD, Molly Johnson, MD, Erica Hake, MD, and Matthew Brennan, MD. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. This letter with over 1,000 doctors signed on, that won't change your minds. I was looking at it and I wondered about these people. So I started looking them up in the voter file that I have, and I noticed that one on the first page is my constituent. And so I looked at it a little bit more, and he's a Republican. And I thought, I wonder, well, he signed on to this letter. So I wonder, he must have had, you know, their scores. He must have had like a score that made him moderate. No, he didn't. Which meant that, and I went to very conservative doors in my district. I've never talked to this individual, ever. They had the most conservative scores. And every survey question that they had ever been asked, they answered the most conservative answer, including opposing stem cell research. That is who has signed on to this letter. My constituent, who's a doctor, who opposes stem cell research, who's clearly a conservative Republican, signed on to this letter, but you don't care. And your constituents too. Your children are posting things on social media. Your children are calling you. Colleagues. You have to live with your vote. The governor doesn't have to live with your vote, and Kathleen Kauth doesn't have to live with your vote. You have to live with your vote. You have to live with the role that you play in history in the making today. You have to live with the fact that you vote to take away people's rights. You have to live with that. The rest of us have to live with the implications of all of that, but you have to live with that. If you didn't sleep after Tuesday night, reflect on that. You don't have to vote for this. You don't have to vote for cloture for this. Senator Armendariz works for Methodist. How are you going to continue working with the people who you are trying to criminalize? You don't have to vote for this. You don't. It's that simple. It is truly, truly that simple. You don't even have to stay here. You could check out and go home and see your kids who are begging you to not vote for this, and tell them that you love them and that you heard them and that you did the right thing, because you know it's the right thing. You know that it is the right thing. You know that this bill is wrong. And you know that under any other circumstance, this never would have happened. And you have the power to stop it. You have the power to stop it. So please stop it. Whatever your reason is if it's because you think that this is going to destroy the GOP, Senator Reapy, it is going to. You're going to lose Omaha and Lincoln. You absolutely are going to lose Omaha and Lincoln. Bo Ballard, Carolyn Bazin, Linehan's district, Armendariz district, Kauth's district. You're going to lose it, but not before you destroy these lives. Listen to your own children. Please. Please.
That's your time, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Senator Day, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, what we know about LB 574 is we have 3 very solid reasons for you to not vote for it today. Number 1, as some of the attorneys in the body and outside the body have articulated, there will be several legal challenges to this bill. As was said on the floor this morning already, there are lawsuits ready to be filed in the event that this gets signed into law. And do you know who's going to pay for all of that? The people sitting up in the balcony. Taxpayers. Because when the state gets sued, that is on the taxpayer's dime. So in terms of being good stewards of taxpayer dollars, if you're voting for this bill today, you are literally throwing taxpayer money down the drain because you know the legal challenges are coming. Number two, we have had 3 separate letters sent to us from the business community. 3 separate letters urging us not to pass this bill. We have seen bills like this pass in other states, and they have literally lost billions of dollars in lost business. Billions. We already have a negative net migration of 2,000 people per year. Educated workers over the age of 25 leaving the state. We will lose jobs. We will lose businesses. We will lose people, even worse than we already are. We will lose billions of dollars on top of the legal challenges that will come from the passage of this bill. Third, every major medical organization in Nebraska and in the United States is opposed to this bill, both pieces of it. The Nebraska Medical Association is opposed to this bill. The American Medical Association is opposed to this bill. The American Academy of Pediatrics is opposed to this bill. The American Psychological Association is opposed to this bill. The American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology is opposed to this bill. Every major medical organization. We've got taxpayer dollars being wasted on legal challenges. We've got the business community telling you we will lose billions if this gets passed. We've got medical organizations of the highest stature urging you not to vote for this because it is dangerous.
1 minute.
And then today, we had a letter from medical professionals in the state that gathered 1,200 and counting signatures in 24 hours. 24 hours. They gathered 1,200 plus and counting, because more are signing on as we stand here, signatures from medical professionals in Nebraska asking you to not vote for this bill. Let us be clear. This bill puts patients' lives at risk, and it puts the careers of medical professionals at risk. We refuse to accept either.
That's your time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Day. While the legislature is in session and capable of transacting business, I propose to sign and do hereby sign Legislative Bill 276A with the emergency clause. Senator Raybould, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm taking a pause from reading letters from physicians, and I'm reading a letter from Senator Moser's constituent in Columbus, but it's directed to Senator Bozen, and she asked me to read it to the body. Dear Senator Bozen, I'm writing today to urge a non-vote or a vote against the bill that restricts abortion even further and that takes away the rights of trans young folks and their parents, as well as women's reproductive rights. A people's government should not be limiting parents' rights and women's rights to do what is best for their family. I don't know if you remember me, but I just talked to your mom in church a couple of months ago. I was your high school math teacher, and while I had you as a student, I lost a baby. Your mom said when you were in my classroom that you too were impacted by my grief. Your mom indicated that this had a huge impact on you while you were my student. What you don't know is that my husband and I had struggled for 4 years to get pregnant with our first child, and I was considered a geriatric mother as I was over 35. The biological time clock was ticking, so to speak. We wanted so badly to have a second child, so our first would have a sibling. We unfortunately had to have an amnio done at 17 weeks, just as we had with our first daughter. We were devastated that our second pregnancy was at risk. Our daughter would most likely be born dead, and she had many, many health issues. Heart was not functioning properly, she had Down syndrome, brain was not developing properly, etc. We had to make a decision, carry it to term or wait until I naturally aborted or end the pregnancy. We consulted with doctors, chaplain, family, etc. We prayed for a direction from God. This child was very much wanted, very much loved, and we had dreams for a wonderful life for her. I had suffered from a pretty tough case of postpartum depression after our first child, so my mental state was also a factor. At 17 weeks, we made the difficult decision to end the pregnancy. I was given a pill to cause me to go into premature labor, and I delivered Sarah Elizabeth dead at 17 weeks. We were crushed, and we've had long-term grief over that difficult decision and loss. God is good and blessed us with a healthy child after that loss. There are many women whom you do not know that are just like me, struggling with these difficult decisions. These decisions should not be limited by the Nebraska Legislature, but rather should be left for the woman, her spouse, her physician, her clergy, and her God to decide. You cannot walk in these folks' shoes, nor should you limit their right to make these difficult decisions. The same is true for troubled teens who are trying to figure out who they are and where they fit in the world. These decisions are extremely difficult without restrictions from the Nebraska Legislature. Leave these decisions to the family, the child, and their doctor to decide. This is no different from a child going through a mental health crisis. Families struggle when a young person is in crisis, and our legislature should not be limiting their medical options. Thank you for reading this letter. It is not one I wanted to share, but at this time I am so worried about the vote today that I felt I must share this. And this letter is from Senator Mosier's constituent in Columbus. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Raybould. Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just listening to the chanting out in the rotunda, and it's nice to hear. This is what democracy looks like. It is what democracy looks like. The new version of LB 574 on final is not what democracy looks like. It's what corruption looks like. It is what the epitome of corruption in politics look like. And 33 people are going to vote for this because honestly, I don't know why they're going to vote for it. Because they're weak. They're going to hurt your kids because they're weak. That's what it comes down to. They can't stand up to a different branch of government. They can't stand up to the governor who did not elect them, who did not send them here. But they can't stand up to that governor. I don't know, I guess the pen of the veto of something that they want. Something that they want is more important than your children. And all of this disingenuous talk about babies, it's all it is. It's lies. It's just lies. They don't care about babies. They don't care about your babies. They care about getting something. And believe me, they're getting something. Because there are people that are voting for this bill that absolutely don't agree with it. And they're voting for it because they're getting something. It's so corrupt. But it is what it is. And it doesn't just come at a cost here in the chamber, as I've said numerous times. This is going to come at a personal cost to many people who vote for this. I'm certain that your kids that have been pleading with you are not going to be happy when you show them how much you don't care about the LGBTQ community. How you are playing a part in feeding into a movement of transphobia. Your kids that you've talked about that are begging you, you're showing them. And you're showing your grandkids. And many of you might actually have a grandchild who is LGBTQ, who's trans, and they don't know it yet, or they haven't shared it with you yet. But what you are doing is telling them
1 minute
that they aren't worthy of you, when the reality is that you are not worthy of them. Nothing I say matters in this chamber. Nothing I say matters in this chamber. So I'm just gonna say the unvarnished truth. That this place is morally bankrupt. That you are playing political games with the lives of children and parents in this state to get something. It's gross. It's vile. Be the person you were sent here to be, not the governor's patsy. Stand up for people. Don't sit down and be complacent.
That's your time, Senator. Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Senator Day, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Okay, so as I mentioned last time, people kind of come in and come out, so I'm going to keep repeating what we know so far about LB 574. Number one, legal experts have illuminated the legal challenges to this bill that already exist. There are lawsuits waiting to be filed in the event that this bill passes and gets signed into law by the governor. Legal challenges are waiting. It will likely cost Nebraska taxpayers millions of dollars in legal fees because there are people already ready to sue the state. And we know, we have heard the basis for those legal arguments, and they are sound. Voting green on LB 574 means you are willing to put Nebraska taxpayers on the hook for millions of dollars in legal fees that are already ready to go. Number two, We've had 3 separate letters from the business community urging us not to pass this bill. 3 separate letters. Two from local business communities, one on a larger, more national scale, but included large corporations, 300 plus large corporations that signed the letter urging us not to pass this bill, including Union Pacific, who is headquartered here in Nebraska, and other businesses that have large multi-million-dollar locations here in this state that have created thousands of jobs for your constituents. Amazon, Cargill, PayPal, Google, all signed the letter asking us not to pass this bill. Other states that have passed bills like LB 574 have lost billions, with a B, billions of dollars in lost business. We know this because it's been calculated. We know this. We've seen it happen. Reports have come out, billions of dollars. North Carolina lost $3.76 billion in business because of their anti-trans bill. Billions. I do not want to hear you talking about being pro-business if you push green on LB 574 today. You are literally saying you are okay with the state losing billions of dollars, losing educated workforce, which is already a problem here. It's simply only going to get worse. This is fact. Number 3, every major medical organization has stated their opposition to both provisions in this bill. The Nebraska Medical Association, the American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Psychological Association, the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, all have stated their opposition to this bill, all of them. And today, we were all given a letter with 1,200 plus signatures that were gathered in the last 24 hours from physicians in Nebraska.
That's your time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Day. Senator Raybould, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is from another physician that I have kept in touch with over the whole course of this debate on LB 574 and LB 626. Dr. Delaney says, I've spent the last couple of weeks trying to process what I heard from all of you during the debate. Many of you who oppose pro-choice position shared truly important stories with regard to your personal stance about abortion. I want you to know I believe these stories are an important part of this narrative. I recognize that many of you have positions regarding abortion that are deeply rooted in your humanity and in your religious beliefs. As a physician who has been working in women's health for almost 14 years, I have heard and have experienced stories just like yours, and have always respected them. I have helped patients keep a pregnancy through difficult fetal anomalies in which the fetus did not perish on delivery. I have helped patients keep a pregnancy and plan an adoption. And these pregnancies have remained a large part of me as a human and a physician. I respect your worldview and want you to know I work hard to meet my patients' goals, whether or not they wish to proceed with, termination, or with maintaining a pregnancy. I'm disheartened that we are in a position where physicians who support choice are looked at as unethical. I'm incredibly frustrated that despite the years of training and hours we work post-training, you believe we are fear-mongering. I am angry you are disappointed in us when none of you have reached out to any of us or taken up on our offer to shadow us as we navigate the complexities and nuances of pregnancy care. What may seem black and white to you never is. One of the scariest things about the practice of medicine is lack of anticipation. To be a good doctor, you must have a plan, and you must think through the consequences of your actions or lack of actions with regard to treatment. It is from this mindset, as well as knowledge from many of my friends and colleagues in states with bills similar to yours, that we all must be prepared and anticipate the changes that occur when politics enters the physician's office. To start with, we will first lose physicians in this state. When you start threatening physicians' licenses with disciplinary action for providing standard of care medicine, they will absolutely choose other places to work. In the northern part of Idaho, there are literally 2 OBGYN physicians left, both of whom are planning to relocate to Washington State in the next 6 months. Ultimately, the women of that great state will have to travel over 3 hours for obstetric care. If doctors don't actually vacate the state, physicians who normally provide obstetric care will stop providing it. For example, in the western part of Nebraska, many great family practice physicians deliver babies. Many of them have reached out to me and disclosed that if this passes, they will just pursue a traditional family practice without obstetrics. Currently, 66.3% of Nebraska is considered a maternal care desert, where women have to drive over an hour to receive adequate care. This bill will absolutely worsen this situation because physicians will not want to fear losing their license. And while I appreciate the exceptions in some of the language of this bill, the maternal life exception is incredibly difficult to interpret. The terms reasonable medical judgment are used, but I guarantee in a state as hostile to physicians as Nebraska is right now, an attorney could twist that same language to indicate the patient was not in harm's way enough to end a pregnancy. For example, pre-viable premature rupture of the membranes is a condition we see quite frequently. It is a condition in which the amniotic sac breaks open too early, for example, at 14 to 16 weeks.
1 minute.
Thank you. At the exact moment the water breaks, a mother's life is not at risk, but standard of care is to offer induction of labor, a type of abortion where the fetus will die outside of the uterus. This is offered because letting the pregnancy continue in this setting can set the patient up for infection, uterine scarring, and subsequent infertility. This is exactly one of the lawsuits pending against the state of Texas. The patient in question was denied induction of labor because a fetal heartbeat remained. Ultimately, she eventually presented septic and spent 10 days in the ICU fighting for her life. She has subsequently developed severe uterine factor infertility directly related to her experience. I need you all to seriously consider what you are doing. I need you all to understand the ramifications of what you are doing for every single woman and girl in this state. I need you to understand that what may seem black and white is absolutely not. I need you to walk in some of my patients' shoes. I need you to love one another without judgment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Raybould. Senator Conrad, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, colleagues. I continue to rise in support of LB 565 and in opposition to the recommit to committee motion before us. Considering that we have very limited time on a significant measure before us, LB 574, that will be on our agenda in about 15 minutes, I wanted to also talk about how important it is to ensure that you can honor your deeply held beliefs and represent your constituents in your state as you see fit, but ensure, in line with our pattern and practice, that we legislate thoughtfully and allow for thoughtful implementation of our laws, particularly when they impact sensitive areas and make dramatic changes. So remember, LB 574 has an emergency clause on it. So under our law, after After it is signed by the governor, it will take effect the next day. So assuming that it is adopted today and signed by the governor today, that will take effect tomorrow. That will take effect tomorrow. This has not been done with abortion laws and abortion restrictions over the modern history of Nebraska. I talked about what happened with the 20-week ban with Senator Flood. I talked about what happened with the abortion method ban with Senator Geist. Neither of those measures had an emergency clause. They allowed for thoughtful implementation to make sure that stakeholders could adopt rules and regulations, were aware of the changes, and the same should hold true for the adoption of LB 574. So I want to also inject into the record the fact that in LB 209 in 2019, Senator Albright brought forward a measure in regards to quote unquote informed consent and biased counseling to let patients know about abortion reversal. That was approved on June 4th, 2019. It did not have an E-clause. The measure to change informed consent did not have an E-clause. LB 690 in 2011 brought forward by Senator Brosh that made changes to judicial bypass and parental notification. Passed May 26, 2011, it did not have an E-clause. It allowed time for thoughtful implementation. LB 521 brought forward by my friend, then Senator Fulton, now formerly our tax commissioner as well. Senator Fulton brought forward LB 521, a ban on telemedicine access to abortion care. It did not have an E-clause. It did not have an E-clause. My friend, Senator Cap Dirks, wow, I'm looking at Myron. I know you remember Cap. It was great to serve with Senator Cap Dirks, and we had a very different point of view when it came to abortion. But we found a way to love each other through it and to work together on a lot of other issues that impacted working families and family farmers, and I'm really grateful I had the chance to serve with him and work with him and learn from him. Senator Dirks brought forward a change to informed consent and counseling called the Women's Health Protection Act in 2009, LB 594. It passed in 2010, and it did not have an E-clause. Abortion restrictions in our modern history and major changes to medical practice put forward, as stated, to be the public policy of the state of Nebraska.
1 minute.
Does not contain an E-clause. Thank you, Mr. President. LB 574 does, colleagues. And what's more harmful than the fact that it has an E-clause and all these other abortion restrictions haven't had E-clauses, you adopted the abortion restrictions 3 days ago. You adopted the abortion restrictions for the first time 3 days ago, and it could become law tomorrow. The law itself is not grounded in medical terminology. It is utilizing political rhetoric. So as doctors and hospitals and medical practices need to convene administrative teams and legal teams to figure out what that jargon means, you could unnecessarily ensnare a healthcare professional who is trying to follow the law, whether that's through civil penalties, the uncertainty of criminal penalties, or their license.
That's your time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Conrad. Senator Blood, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fellow Senators, friends all, I stand opposed to the recommit to committee in support of the dispense with the reading and in full support of the underlying bill. And I'm glad that Senator Conrad brought up the language in the bill, because that's what I want to talk about a little bit. And this is one of the things when we talk about unintended consequences that happened. We've discovered that in the last bill, where all of a sudden they realized that they had eliminated the ability for people to get IVF and panicked. Now we are rushing through a second bill, and I want to point out some language, and again, Senator Conrad unknowingly set me up for this. So the word preborn is used throughout the bill, and the word preborn is not a medical term. Get on the phones, call your doctors, they're going to tell you the same thing. Now, In the first part of the bill, you've excluded in vitro and the termination of the embryos that are not carried inside a woman's body. And so you feel that by doing that in the bill, you've eliminated the risk to people that utilize IVF. Now, I know that in Catholicism, especially in our state, that they are already against IVF, but it sounds like they're willing to look the other way to get the rest of the bill passed. But listen, later in the bill, you define preborn child as a Homo sapien throughout the embryonic and fetal stages of development. So when you fertilize an embryo in a petri dish, what happens? That is the beginning of the embryonic stage. So you have literally said, hey, if you're going to have IVF, we're going to look the other way. And then later in the bill, you say, oh, but if it's in the process, the embryonic process, we're not going to allow that. Again, you rush through the bill, you mess up the language, you've created, yet again, an issue that people are going to take concern with. So either you did it knowingly or unknowingly, but you've taken away a woman's right to conceive through IVF, these precious babies that you say that you want to support, because not every woman has the ability, unfortunately, to conceive through intercourse. But that's on you. So fetus is not an unborn or preborn baby or child. In fact, the terminology unborn, according to the medical community, starts at 11 weeks. And so you have the goal to legislate this medical care, and then you use improper medical terminology, which gets to the point again that we are not doctors. And now by putting an E clause on this, you don't get to fix it. Unless, of course, you try and amend it on today's reading and take it back to select, but you will never do that. And just like the anti-trans part of the bill, you haven't asked us for our opinion nor been willing to change anything. And whether you like it or not, as I discussed earlier, courts have consistently recognized for decades that parents have the fundamental right to raise their children, and that includes the right for parents to make health care decisions for their children. And this is one reason these types of laws continue to get struck down, like what happened in Arkansas. You put out the false narrative that children were lining up like it was some kind of candy store.
Judgment
when this
and
bill
shame,
that we're going to pass today is maybe going to affect
is their fear
4 to
for
5
personal
kids a year,
safety.
Maybe, who've gone through a very extensive process that takes years. Because again, the average age for this type of surgery is 29.5
we have
years.
Heard
you heard one of our senators talk about how
That's to abortion.
That's your time. Oh, excuse me.
no,
1 minute.
I didn't get 1 minute. Thank you, sir.
Voting yes, and Armendariz.
It's very expensive surgery. So what's the Constitution between friends anyway, right?
Skylar Black.
The Constitution authorizes only
Incidentally,
limited government, which you never seem worried about until you have a bill that you're trying to say, we need to stop government overreach until you want government overreach. So how is it okay that a nation conceived in and dedicated to individual liberty now feels it must be involved in our health care? And when they're involved, they can't even get the language right so it's medically accurate. Good on you. Enjoy your time in the courts. You guys all know better. I don't care what the topic is. If you can't write the bill correctly, it should never get to the floor. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Blood. Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, you're recognized to speak, and this is your third time on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sorry. Well, I think we're moving on to the next bill in 8 minutes. So, I wanted to
Judgment and shame, and who can answer their.
Wanted to document
This is from
the opposition to LB 574 because we've had medical professionals, we've had businesses, we've had faith leaders.
Let me remind you,
Signing letters. We've had people come and testify. We've had people send emails. We've had phone calls, showing up in the rotunda, showing up in the balcony. And I wanted to have a more formal record. So I did put on my Twitter a Google form for anyone who is interested in making their name a part of a record of opposition to LB 574. And I ask that people, and it will remain private, that they put their addresses in, because I will be verifying before I share it with my colleagues that they are Nebraskans and real people. But it has been less than 2 hours and 300 people have signed on. So I know it doesn't matter, but this is historic. I very much doubt, but I always stand for correction, that there has been a time in the Nebraska legislative history where so many people have opposed something where this deliberative body didn't listen to them and just did it anyway. But we are no longer a deliberative body. We are here to be bought off by the governor because he wants this win. And we don't care if it's going to harm people, because we're getting something for it. But I look forward to 2025, when I no longer have to serve with so many of you. And I'm not talking about the term-limited senators. I look forward to not serving with the senators that are up for re-election in 2025 or 2024, but in 2025 session, that you won't be here anymore, that you can't harm people anymore, because you allowed yourselves to be bought by the governor. But the people will remember today. And they will remember that you did not act with kindness. You did not act with compassion. You did not take into consideration your role and responsibility to them. You allowed yourself to be bought by the governor for just a win.
1 minute.
Just a win. Can't have a loss. Gotta have only wins. The governor. You're giving him that win, but you're gonna get a loss. And I look forward to that day. Until then, colleagues, I'll be filibustering. Till the end of the 108th legislature, 2024, I'll be filibustering. Until you get that loss, I'll be filibustering. And to the people watching, to the trans kids, you are loved, you matter, you're worth fighting for, and I'm not going to stop fighting for you.
That's your time, Senator. Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Speaker Arch, you're recognized for a message.
Colleagues, per the agenda, we will now move on to the next item on the agenda, 574.
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, quickly some items. Amendments to be printed in Senator Michaela Kavanaugh to LB 565E and 565AE. Additionally, communication LB 276E and 276AE were presented to the governor on May 19th, 2023 at 1:30 p.m. Mr. President, next item on the agenda, Legislative Bill 574. Senator Hunt would move to recommit LB 574 to committee.
And prior to that, I'll simply read that the presiding officer has the discretion to empty the galleries in cases of disturbance or disorderly conduct. While I don't anticipate exercising that authority, I'd just like to remind everybody observing the legislature that there should be no outbursts, including clapping, heckling, or cheering. Senator Kavanaugh, please state your point of order.
Thank you, Mr. President. The queue, I know that the pages were swapping out, but the queue was not cleared at the start.
Senator Kavanaugh, we will reread the bill, and as soon as it's read, we'll clear the queue. Mr. Clerk, for items.
Mr. President, next item on the agenda, Legislative Bill 574. There's a priority motion. Senator Hunt would move to recommit the bill to the Health and Human Services Committee.
Senator Hunt, you're recognized to open on your motion.
I wonder if it's possible to crash that queue system, that software. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Nebraskans. Thank you, Nebraskans, for this last 81 days of advocacy, of love, of tears, of this ethic of love and inclusivity that you have brought to the state of Nebraska. Whatever happens today, trans people belong. You are loved. And what these 49 people can do to you has nothing to do with the rest of your life. I was talking to Senator John Kavanaugh before we started this, and I asked him if he wanted my time because I honestly feel kind of numb. You know, I almost don't have any more to say. Yet it keeps bubbling up. Yet the fountain doesn't stop. And as I was talking to Senator Kavanaugh about perhaps yielding him my time if he wanted to speak instead, I got this email from a trans 16-year-old who goes to Omaha Central High School, and this is the perfect opening. This is the perfect thing for me to say, and I hope I do it justice. This is an email from his mother. She says, I want to share a poem that was delivered in the preliminary and semifinal rounds by my 16-year-old trans child, who is a member of the first place poetry team from Omaha Central. He gave me permission to share, but prefers his name be withheld. His poem is entitled, I Need Them to Treat It Like It Is. Thank you so much for your blood, sweat, and tears. It matters. Love, a Nebraska mama of an amazing trans kid. I need them to treat it like it is. I am waiting in lines of traffic for someone to walk up beside me, knock on my window so hard it breaks. I am waiting in lines of traffic, in my mother's car, in my mother's body, for it to finally be my turn to crash. I am waiting with my body on the floor of my shower, or on my bed, or in the middle of an alley, for them to declare my death a suicide. I need them to treat it like it is. I need them to treat it like a murder because to be trans is to wait in traffic, hoping it will be a quick death, a merciful end, a sharp collision, fleeting as fluttering wings. To be trans is to be constantly reminded of how they want you to die in your cocoon before you can even begin. When you see me lying slumped right there, Don't send your useless thoughts and prayers. Check yourself. Look back on every word, every pronoun left out of your vocabulary, every time you stayed quiet in the face of genocide. Because yeah, it is that deep. Your trans peers notice when you don't speak. Look into our eyes. Do we make you uncomfortable? Do I make your knees weak? Now look at your hands. This is no suicide. I need you to treat it as it is. Every trans suicide is a murder. That was a poem from a 16-year-old trans boy from Omaha Central High School who's part of the first place poetry team here in Nebraska. To parents of trans kids, I get what you're going through. I can't know what it feels like to be trans, but I know what it feels like when you see the life that you may have imagined for your child from the time you first saw them on the sonogram to when you first held them in your arms, fixed scraped knees, picked out outfits for the first day of school. I know what it feels like to have some expectations and dreams that you had for your child, and you realize that it's not going to be that way. But I want to assure you that your child's identity is not a reflection of your parenting. It's simply who they are. It's simply who they are. And if you are blessed to know that your child is trans, you should feel proud as a parent, because that means your child knows that they are safe with you. We are in the midst of a time of unprecedented violence for LGBTQ people in our country. We are working to fight for rights that we have already won. And there are kids on the streets, kids doing, survival criminal activity, kids who are forming groups to take care of each other as new chosen families, because there are thousands and thousands and thousands of families in this country that are rejecting their LGBTQ kids. So if you have the blessing and honor of knowing your child is queer or trans or anything different from what we thought they would be when we were first holding them in our arms, what we thought they would be when we first dropped them off at kindergarten, what we thought they would be as we shopped for Christmas presents for them when they were 10. If you have the blessing of knowing them as they are, that is a testament to your parenting as the best possible parenting that child can get. Our kids need our love and support now more than ever. Senator Aguilar, your kid needs your love and support. And these feelings when our kids come out can lead to a lot of grief and a lot of complicated feelings, but knowing who our kids are is what life is about. People are different. I also want to take a moment to speak directly to the trans kids in Nebraska. There are a lot of inconsistencies in this bill in terms of how you're going to be able to receive care. What happens if we have a trans kid in Nebraska who is not yet on puberty blockers, who's maybe 8 or 9 or 10? Maybe that kind of medication is not appropriate for them yet, according to medical professionals. What happens to those kids as they get older, as they have different medical needs as trans kids? They're not grandfathered in, even though they've already transitioned socially, even though they're trans, even though they're living as they are. That's a problem with this amendment. What happens if a 13-year-old boy has been taking puberty blockers, and 3 years from now when he's 16, he wants to start hormone therapy with support of his family and doctor? He won't be able to do that under this bill with the grandfather clause. Senator Kauth and members of this body think that they have found a compromise. They think that they have found a way to make this bill work for people in Nebraska who have already transitioned, but this bill does not. It does not. And if you believe it does, if you are one of the people who had qualms and questions about wanting to come to an amendment that results in something better for the kids of Nebraska because you have compassion for those kids, this amendment isn't it. It doesn't do what you think it's going to do. Let us acknowledge the hypocrisy of the religious far-right conservatives here who seek to pass discriminatory bans on gender-affirming care. These are the same people who claim to be defenders of freedom and liberty, yet they seek to deny transgender individuals the ability to live and be free and be themselves as their true selves. That is not freedom. That's not liberty. That's not morality. Denying transgender youth the medical care they need to live a happy and healthy life is not morality. And the effect that this is having on the entire LGBTQ community in Nebraska and those who love them is not an expression of morality. There's going to be extensive legal action against the state for this bill if it passes today. Mr. President, I'll withdraw my motion.
The motion is withdrawn. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Senator John Kavanaugh moved to return the bill to select file for a specific amendment, that being AM 1474.
Senator John Kavanaugh, you're recognized to open on your motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. To be clear, I get 10 minutes?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I rise in opposition to LB 574 in this form and any other form. I have my amendment on the board, and I have no illusions about the fact that I don't think any of you will vote for it. So I did want to take my time to clarify some of the things, my questions and concerns about the LB 574 as it is currently amended. So I'd ask if Senator Hansen would yield to some questions.
Senator Hansen, would you yield to a question?
Yes. Thank you, Senator Hansen. So the bill as it's written now is basically an amendment that you proposed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
I just want to make sure I've got the right person on the mic.
Yep.
So I got a couple questions that I want to clarify that from people that I've heard are confused about. So in this bill, the ban on gender-affirming care would go into effect on October 1st of 2023. Does that sound right?
That is the operative date, yes.
Okay. And then after that effective date, for anybody, trans person under 19 won't be able to get care except for as permitted by the chief medical officer?
Yeah, whatever rules they promulgate.
Okay. And so, so the chief medical officer has to set up those rules to allow for the care, as you just said. So after October 1st, 2023, if no person who's previously who has not been previously had care will be able to get care unless it's in compliance with those rules from the chief medical officer. Does that sound right?
From my understanding, yes.
Okay. And then if somebody is currently receiving, say, puberty blockers, they will be able to continue after October 1st.
From my understanding, yes.
Okay. And so if they were to, would they be able to then move on to hormone treatment after October 1st, or will they be banned from continuing in their course of care?
That I can't completely answer, but I can get back to you on that if I need to.
Okay. Thank you. So if the chief medical officer hasn't promulgated those rules by October 1st, will there be a path for anyone to start care after October 1st?
Again, that's another one I can't quite answer I want to make sure I'm 100% accurate if I'm going to answer some of these questions. That one I can't answer right off the top of my head.
Okay.
I'll do my best if I do find out. I'll do my best even on the microphone to kind of clarify that.
I appreciate that. And obviously, everybody, we have to talk a little loud here because there's a lot of folks in the rotunda. So once the chief medical officer promulgates those rules, how long will they be in effect before they can come back and change them again?
That I'm unsure. That might be something that they determine, the chief medical officer and DHHS, per their rules and regulations that they set forth.
Okay. And does the bill tell the chief medical officer what criteria they have to consider when setting these rules?
Yes, there are. We do have some. I have to find it here in the bill, but there are some contingencies I think we want to see them address when they promulgate the rules and regulations.
So when you say the bill sets out minimum standards that they'd have to set, right?
From my understanding, yes.
Okay, but I haven't seen anywhere in the bill, and if you could point to it, where it tells them what criteria they're supposed to consider as they set those minimum standards. Are you aware of a place in the bill where it says that?
I'm looking at it right now.
Okay. And maybe we can visit off the mic about that as well. And you might have an opportunity, but I just want to get some of these questions at least out there so people know what people have been concerned about. So you did mention DHHS, and so looking at it, it says DHHS will develop rules and says that they cannot be inconsistent with the chief medical officer's rules. Is that right?
Yes, my understanding, yes.
So does this mean that whatever the chief medical officer develops for rules cannot be undone by DHHS?
That I'm unsure of.
Okay. And so the chief medical officer has to approve the rules. Does that mean, so he'll make the decision, is that, I guess he makes the final decision, is that the right way to read it?
Can you repeat that again? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, it is loud in here. So, sorry, where was I here? Okay, so the bill says, I misread it, so it's not your fault. So the bill says that it refers to drugs that are approved. You recall that part? It's on page 15, line 25.
There, okay, I was on the wrong page.
Okay.
Yeah, the administration prescribing delivery, sale, or of use of puberty drug and cross-sex hormones, yes.
So it says that they can make rules that allow for drugs that are approved. Is the chief medical officer the one who would approve those drugs?
I would assume that based on the information he gets from the medical community, best practices, and DHHS. But I can't say with 100% certainty. That's just what I'm assuming.
Okay, but it's in the bill, as it reads, it doesn't say who makes that decision or who approves the drugs?
I don't think explicitly on that section right there.
So, all right. If the chief medical officer is going to make changes to the rules, do they have to give any notice? Or is he just allowed flexibility in cases of emergencies to make changes to the practice?
I'm uncertain.
Okay. So it looks like the authority is delegated to the chief medical officer is ongoing. So he can make changes as required based off of like what's going on in the practice at the time. Does that sound right?
Again, it probably depends on how they promulgate the rules and regulations and what they set forth.
Okay. And so get back to the minimum standards. So it says that the chief medical officer is supposed to set minimum standards, certain requirements and standards. Is that right, I guess?
Yeah, set the minimum, which include, the following, and those were some of the criteria that you were discussing earlier.
So are those minimum standards, is that like just a place to start, and then you can go from there and see what fits?
I would assume so, yes.
Okay. And then, so the chief medical officer is authorized to adjust the minimum standards as they see fit. Does that sound right?
It depends on, again, how they promulgate the rules and regulations when they set forth.
Okay. And so then there's a part on that, I think it's on that same page or maybe a little bit further down, about the waiting period. So that one of the rules.
Yes.
Okay. See that part? So, and again, that would be determined by the chief medical officer?
Are you talking about the patient medical record documentation requirements?
It's a little bit, it's the next one or two down from that. That they give informed consent and then they have a waiting period before they can start care?
What line is that on?
It would be on page 16, line 11.
Okay. I thought it was on page 15.
Sorry.
Line 11, you said?
Yep. A minimum wait period between the time the healthcare practitioner obtains informed consent and the administration of prescription.
You said page 16, line 11?
Yep. Oh, are you on, sorry, you're on the original amendment, not the, I got you. Page 15, line 18, I'm told.
There we go.
Yeah, so the ENR changes the lining on once it gets re-enrolled, sorry.
A minimum waiting period between the time the healthcare practitioner obtains informed patient consent and the administration, prescribing, or delivery of puberty blocking drugs, cross-sex hormones, or both to such patient.
So,
yes.
And my question about the waiting period is, the chief medical officer gets to set what that waiting period is?
A minimum waiting period looks like yes.
So my question is, what is the order of magnitude of that waiting period? Is it a week, a day, a month, a year?
It would probably be up to the chief medical officer, and then what they determine as best practices and medical advice.
Okay.
I'm assuming again.
And then I really do appreciate your helping with these clarifying.
I'm doing the best I can, sir.
No, I appreciate it. I told you I was going to ask you some questions. I didn't give you all of them. So the last one I have is long-lasting. There's on mine it was page 15, but I think it's probably page 14 before that. But there's terms like long-lasting and intense for determining what's appropriate. Do you know if those would be, again, is it up to the definition of the chief medical officer, how to define what is long-lasting and what is intense?
1 minute.
Again, I can only assume what they're going to do based on medical advice, best practices, and also the types of prescribing. You talk about the medications? The hormones?
That particular section applies to what criteria they would consider, I think.
Okay, yeah, I'm assuming that would be up to the chief medical officer and then his how they promulgate the rules.
Well, I appreciate those were all of my questions at the time. If I get another chance, I might ask some more. But I appreciate it, Senator Hansen. So, colleagues, I'm going to run out of time here. I hope to get a chance to talk some more. But I think there are a lot of unanswered questions about this bill. There's some ambiguity. There's some things that are unclear. That just require a little bit more discussion about this bill, and we're here on final reading. This is really the first time we're discussing this bill at the moment, as it's currently written, and we didn't get these questions, in front of a committee. We didn't get a hearing, and we're rushing to implement this bill.
That's your time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Senator Breezy, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, colleagues. I rise in support of LB 574, and you can portray this bill any way you want, but for me, this bill is simply about protecting innocent life and protecting our kids, period. And this represents a reasonable place to land in that effort. And a lot of us would like something more than what we ended up with here, but this LB 574, the final reading version, represents compromise. With it, we've accommodated concerns relative to rape, incest, medical emergencies. With it, we've protected our kids from irreversible and potentially dangerous surgical procedures while still ensuring some standards for other gender-affirming medical services. It represents a balance of competing interests, and that's what we do in this body all the time. We balance competing interests, and this is where we have arrived in that endeavor here. And relative to the original provisions of 574, the final reading version reflects many of the concerns expressed in those meetings that many of us were involved in regarding 574. The need to protect youth from harmful, irreversible procedures, but while at the same time preserving the ability to access some of these medical procedures under limited circumstances. Now, you can spin this however you want. You can frame it any way you want. You can describe it any way you want. I've heard words like hateful and anti-trans, homophobic, things like that, and that's baloney. At the end of the day, LB 574 is about protecting innocent life and protecting kids. Nothing more, nothing less. And I would urge your support of LB 574. And with that, I would like to yield the balance of my time to Senator Kauth if she would like it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Breezy. Senator Kauth, that's 2 minutes and 45 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to address a lot of the extreme things that have been said over the course of the last 4 months. And Senator Breezy spoke to this briefly. The word hate has never come from this side of the discussion. We certainly don't hate anyone. The reason we brought this bill is because we love kids. We want to see them grow up and be happy, healthy adults, no matter how they choose to live their adult life. We've had a lot of hateful things said. Labeling this bill as creating genocide, that's shameful. Genocide is the entire destruction of an entire class of people, killing them all. This isn't about killing anyone. This is about protecting kids until they are able to make a decision with more information. I challenge any of you to think back to when you were a teen or younger. Do you still do, say, believe, or feel any of the same things that you felt then? Senator Hunt made the comment during some of our many months of them discussing this bill that teenagers change their mind from one moment to the next. That is exactly correct. They do. We owe it to them to be the adults in the room and say, yes, you feel bad. There's something wrong. You don't feel right. Let's figure out what's going on. Let's not give you drugs. Let's not give you irreversible experimental medications and surgeries to try to fix something physical first.
1 minute.
The adults in the room are trying very hard to come up with legislation that will provide guidelines for kids who are dealing with gender dysphoria. It does not mean by any stretch of the imagination that we hate them. Quite on the contrary, it means that we love them and we want them to be well taken care of. We've had 4 months of discussion, and I've gotten a lot of questions about why aren't the Republicans, why aren't the people who support this bill pushing back? We made a very strong commitment to talk about the bill on the board rather than trying to take up all the time on this bill. These discussions have been being had off the mic and not wasting time. We have worked with each other and with members of the opposition to craft language that we feel
That's
is
your
appropriate.
time, Senator.
Thank you.
Senator, thank you, Senator Kauth. Senator Lowe, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. 81 days. 81 days is what we've spent talking on this bill. It's time it's come to an end. Hate has not come from our side. Fear has not come from our side. The noise does not come from our side. Our side is silent, as most of us have been for 81 days. Because we feel it in our heart, we know it in our head, and we know that this bill is the right bill. It's a compromise. Many of us feel that the 6-week heartbeat bill was the answer. We are giving up 6 weeks as a compromise. We are giving up those little children that will never breathe air. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry for those children. We put up with name calling and the fear tactics, and that other senators would yell at us that they will never speak to us again. And what do? We just say okay. So I am for LB 574 that Senator Kauth brought because it is a good bill. And because we are for children. We're not out to mutilate children. We're not out to harm their bodies with chemicals. We're not out to kill children. So please support LB 574. And with that, I yield the rest of my time to Senator Linehan.
Thank you, Senator Lowe. Senator Linehan, you have 2 minutes, 50 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President. I didn't get on the microphone this morning, but I'm going to read from, I guess I'd call it an advertisement. It's from the web. It's from CARE, which is an abortion clinic, Omaha, Nebraska. CARE is the preferred abortion clinic near Omaha, Nebraska. Every member of our team has pledged to make your experience with us one we would want for ourselves, friends and family members. Our abortion clinic near Omaha, Nebraska, provides and specializes in second and third trimester abortion care. We are one of the nation's only abortion care that provide abortion care throughout the pregnancy, meaning first, second, third trimester abortion care. We actively recognize the need for care we provide, and we are proud to serve our patients with comprehensive abortion care. To learn more, I won't read the number, and then it goes down and says, you know, we've called, care can get you in for an appointment within a week. Our usual wait for an appointment is less than 3 days. So I'm sure you're all asking, well, I can't do that in Nebraska because we have a 20-week ban. But they have a sister clinic in Maryland. And in Maryland, Bethesda, Maryland, you can. Third trimester abortions. I think there should be an E-clause on this bill. And I don't think any of those doctors that signed the letters that said they didn't support this bill know that this is going on. Knowing that all you have to do is Google abortion care and it pops up with Planned Parenthood. It's outrageous, folks. And it's near Omaha, Nebraska. And we're acting like women can't get reproductive care in Nebraska, or this is about mothers' lives. No, this is about being one of the places in the nation where you can get referrals for third trimester babies that, where they weren't aborted, could live. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Linehan. Senator Jacobson, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I'll speak up so everyone can hear me and not be bothered by what's going on out in the rotunda. I want to thank Senator Linehan for her comments because they're spot on. It's horrifying what goes on in this country. Horrifying. We all want to mislead each other on what's really in this bill, but let's talk about what's really in this bill instead of all the garbage you've heard from the time this bill was introduced. This bill is about protecting children, unborn children, and yes, Senator Blood, they're unborn children, preborn children, and those who are under the age of 19 who are interested in going through hormone treatments and puberty blockers without proper direction. The bill does not ban puberty blockers and hormone treatments. It simply puts it under the jurisdiction of HHS and the state medical director to determine what the right protocol should be. What it does ban is the removal of breasts of young women under the age of 19. People say, well, should we stop breast augmentations as well? I'd be fine with that. They're minors. And yes, people say, well, you can't compare it to underage drinking. Why can't you? If a parent is buying alcohol for their underage child, they could be arrested for procuring alcohol for a minor. There are laws out there that protect underage children. That's what we're doing here. We're not the bad guys. We're trying to protect young children and young adults that before the age of 19, and we're trying to protect preborn children from being brutally murdered in the womb. That's what we're trying to do. I could spend time on the mic today talking about our journey with reproduction. I could talk about adoption, but you've all heard that, and I'm tired of taking my wife and my daughter through that journey publicly. I want to publicly apologize for the things that were said about Ray Aguilar by two members of this body, one in particular who has spewed hate every time she got up to speak on the mic. Shame on her, and she knows who she is. Ray Aguilar is a fine human being who's got the longest standing current tenure in this legislative body, and someone I truly admire. But let's talk a little bit about some of the other facts. We've heard a lot about everybody's leaving Nebraska, but that's kind of interesting because I'm looking at a report from 2023 Best State Rankings by U.S. News for young people to live in. Guess who's number 5 out of 50? Nebraska. First is Utah. Second, New Hampshire. Third, Idaho. Fourth, Connecticut. Number 5, Nebraska. Now, I'm not going to waste reams of paper to send it out to everybody. If you want to look at it, here it is. Let's talk a little bit about California. Boy, there's a great place to live, isn't it? I've been watching over the last 2 years the number of people that have moved to North Platte and some of the transfers of property that have occurred in North Platte. Guess where they're coming from? Front Range of Colorado and California.
1 minute.
Almost to a person, the people coming from California, what are they saying? We want to get away from the crazy politics, the super high taxes, and the cost. People from the Front Range of Colorado, we can sell our house in the Front Range of Colorado, buy an equal quality home in North Platte for the equity in our home in the Front Range and cut our cost of living in half or more. Nebraska has tremendous reasons to be here. We have abundant clean water, we have clean air, we have safe cities, we have great work ethic, we have business-friendly environments. Pacific Life Insurance Company is headquartered in Nebraska. Why? Because we're business-friendly, particularly to insurance companies. I don't care, I'm not concerned at all about business leaving Nebraska. The businesses that want to be here, we're going to build a great business environment, and people will want to work for those companies. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Jacobson. Senator Bozen, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to start by saying that the narrative that has been present for my duration of time here has been that anyone who opposes this or anyone who supports this bill or its amendment hates transgender children, wishes to kill transgender children, or does not care about women's rights. And I want to correct that because that is not true, at least as far as I am concerned. To my friends, my family members, and my colleagues who belong to the LGBTQ+IA category, I do not hate you. I do not hate your family members. I do not hate your children. I don't even know how to correct something that's so offensive and misleading, but it is not true. It has never been true, and it will never be true about myself. No matter what anyone stands up and says about how I feel or if I really felt that way, I do this. I can't capitulate on that fact. It is not true. This bill isn't about being unsupportive of transgender children. It's about preventing irreversible changes to their bodies until they're adults. I'm not opposed to things that people are saying I'm opposed to. I don't think anyone in this room really is. This isn't about ignoring women's rights. It's about protecting the rights of babies who have the right to live. This bill is about protecting the rights of children to be children and to let them grow. And with that, Mr. President, I would yield the rest of my time to Senator Kauth.
Thank you, Senator Bozen. Senator Kauth, you have 3 minutes, 15 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Bozen, very well said, and welcome to the legislature. You're killing it. I would like to thank every single one of the senators that I work with who has been kind and considerate and thoughtful in these discussions, who has pushed back and has given good reasons for it, who has taken the time to work with me on this bill, and who has supported it and supported me. It is so very much appreciated because we have been being swamped with hate, with nasty messages, with our colleagues demanding that we be collegial even as they spew hatred at us directly. I do not underestimate the toll this has taken on everyone, and I wanted you to know on the record that I appreciate you all. I'm going to read something from one of my constituents. As a physician of 25 years, we have a lot of doctors who have voiced opinions on this. This is someone who's read the bill. I've seen patients that have been placed on hormone blockers or hormones to attempt to transition them. They were all adults who could make informed decisions. That is what we have to stress. This is about adults can make these decisions. Children cannot. Every one of them, despite if they were taking masculine or feminine hormones, had severe side effects with their liver and kidneys. These hormones are not safe in fully mature people and are certainly not safe in people with bodies that have not yet matured. These medications are not FDA approved for these uses, and no one knows the long-term side effects of them. Please protect our children and let them grow up safely. And doctor, that is exactly what this bill is intended to do. And I want to stress, this is a doctor saying that these drugs have not been tested. They are not, thank you, Mr. President. They are not FDA approved for this use. We don't let our kids eat preservatives. We're very concerned about what goes into their bodies. We try to take care of them in so many different ways. But yet, when we have an experimental medication that has no long-term data in children, it seems, Mr. President,
Speaker Arch, you're recognized.
I would ask that you clear the balconies.
We'll ask security to clear the balconies, please. Security, if one side could hold until you're asked to leave by security.
We will stand in recess.
Speaker Arch, you are recognized.
I can't hear you. We stand at ease.
Members, we will stand at ease.